Our friend Jason Hill is a philosophy professor at DePaul and therefore is steeped in the questions of right and wrong, the ethics of complicated situations like war. Here's a piece over at Front Page. Will Israel do what it takes to secure peace? One criterion that may be used to justify what may also be called wars of total annihilation, for which the bombings of Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki would qualify, is the following. When the arc of the entire moral infrastructure of a nation or its political combatants is predicated on the destruction and annihilation of another nation or state, and further, when the citizens of such nations and states or regions or governing units support the infrastructure and its architects, a war of total annihilation can be ethically defended. A war of total annihilation can be ethically defended in that situation. One of the moral lessons, Hill writes additionally, we learn from the bombing of Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, is that war is not just about vanquishing the enemy, it's also about inflicting generational damage. Future generations are deterred from enacting a war of vengeance at a much later time, or, just as importantly, of repeating the errors of their predecessors. The collective memory of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Dresden is an important reason why other nations will think twice about starting a war with the United States. Much of the world has a problem grasping the fact that Hamas has a maniacal and congenital hatred of Israel. It wants the country and its Jewish population exterminated. It is a genocidal organization. There is such a thing as the intractable evil that habitually wills and executes destruction. To this end, Israel's allies must recognize her strategic moral infallibility in fighting this new war. This means that any means used to defend against a menacing invading aggressor is proper. Maybe then and only then will Israel be able to remember how it used to fight its early wars and remember how the Americans and the British mastered the art of truly vanquishing the enemy in World War II. War of total annihilation. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Jonathan Tobin, who's the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Jonathan, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back.
What do you think about what Professor Hill is arguing about the philosophical and thus strategic and actual approach that Israel and her allies should take with respect to Hamas?
I think it's right on target. And I think it's also right on target as to what's going to be the focus of debate and discussion about events in the region, in the Middle East, and what's about to unfold as I believe Israel's about to begin its counteroffensive sometime, within the next 48 hours. I don't know exactly when, but it's happening soon. The forces are massing. And we've already seen that the wonderful statements of President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken, and I'm not a big fan of those guys. Normally, I criticize them all the time, and I would criticize how their policies help lead to these outrages of what happened in this week. But what they've said since last Saturday has been excellent. The question is, are they going to keep being behind Israel? Once Israel is about to do the job that it knows it needs to do, which is to take down Hamas, not to merely try to reestablish some mythical deterrence of these people, not to return to a status quo of October 6th, but to make not to retaliate or enact some act of vengeance, but to ensure that this will never happen again, because this vile Islamist state, which is really an independent Palestinian state in all but name that has existed since 2007, it has to go down. It has to be defeated. And the only way wars end is, as Professor Hill pointed out, when one side, the side that is the aggressor, the side that is truly evil, like Nazi Germany, is defeated completely, absolutely. And its people are convinced of this and know they have to choose something else. Germany is a sane nation today because the Allies utterly destroyed Germany and utterly defeated the German regime and army. And that's what has to happen with Hamas in Gaza, because anything else ensures future war, more bloodshed, a repeat of all this. And yet that is what, mainstream corporate liberal opinion in this country is already beginning to say. Don't invade Gaza. Keep Hamas there. It's an idea. It's not just an organization. You can't defeat it. Those are the counsels not merely of defeatism, but of appeasement of evil. And if the Biden administration listens to that and just lets Israel attack for a day or two and then says stop, well, they will be betraying not merely Israel, but American interests as well.
What about all the hostages? What's the plan there? I know that they've announced that there's going to be no aid into Gaza until the hostages are returned, and we still have 14 unaccounted for Americans that they believe might be hostages as well.
God should help them. I don't know. And certainly we all pray for them to be safe, for them to be returned home in one piece. But the hostages, as important as they are, and if you know anything about Israel, when there was just one Israeli soldier that was kept prisoner by Hamas, there was an enormous movement to do anything to free him, and over 1,000 terrorists were released in exchange. Mm-hmm. But I think Israelis understand now that after the atrocities of the last week, where over 1,300 people were slaughtered, unspeakable crimes, rape, beheadings of infants, it's hard to even think about it, let alone speak about it. I think there's an understanding that rescuing the hostages and ransoming them, and thereby letting Hamas, skate and profit from this, just is not an option.
You said if the Biden administration lets Israel only retaliate for a short period of time rather than do the job that's required. But, you know how susceptible the regime in America is to the moral relativism of the left. You just mentioned what we've been hearing, frankly, since last weekend when the attacks occurred, which is I'm against killing on both sides. And so when they're essentially swayed by that opinion amplified by the DC press corps, what's Israel to do? I mean, does Netanyahu have the popular support and the wherewithal to ignore the moral relativism coming from the West and say, we are going to do the job we know we need to do, regardless of sort of popular opinion in the West?
Well, I think right now, Netanyahu has no choice. Let's understand something. What happened in Israel last weekend was a catastrophe for the military and intelligence establishment.
Right. Comparable
to 9/11, comparable to Pearl Harbor. When all this is over, heads are going to roll. I mean, there's going to be a commission, and it's not going to look good for a lot of people. There was a lot of failure, and frankly, Netanyahu is the man in charge. It happened on his watch, and he is unlikely to survive this in the long run. And as much as he wasn't the one asleep at the border, and as much as he's done amazing things for Israel during his long career, he was also an advocate of the idea that just deter Hamas, leave them in place. He's always, as much as he's always depicted in America as extreme, he's very cautious about the use of military force, and he has forbeared from attacking Gaza, because he didn't want to lose all the Israelis. That would mean he didn't want to have the whole thing. It was like, just stay there. Let's have a ceasefire. He was always for that. And he has no choice. His legacy is on the line. If Hamas is standing, as they expect to, when all this is over, and claiming victory and claiming political profit for the Palestinian national cause of destroying Israel, he knows that he will pay the price for that. So he has the support inside Israel for doing whatever right now, doing whatever it takes. The question is, does he have Western support? And all the fine things we're hearing in the last few days. And I can't praise President Biden's statements enough. and I'm not a fan of President Biden. Quite anybody who knows my work, I'm a big critic of Biden and Blinken and the whole rest of that Obama alumni club that run our foreign policy right now, that appeased Iran, that made all sorts of mistakes to help make this possible. But everything we know about them shows that they're gonna, that they will not stick with Israel when the going gets tough. Because that's the whole foreign policy establishment, the media, will influence them. It's already trying to do that, and there's no reason to think that they will stand up to it. But Netanyahu is going to have to ignore it.
Well, going back to Jason Hill's piece, Professor Hill from DePaul's piece, that's what we've done in America, and to some extent, it's been done in Israel too. Create the illusion of peace. That's enough. And what Hill writes is, the illusion of peace will suffuse the global imagination for the simple reason that much of the world remains anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, which of course is also true. And so the question is, does it finally register? Does it finally register with Jews in America? Does it finally register with the West in general? That the illusion of peace is just that, an illusion. And we tell ourselves beautiful lies at great cost.
Well, I have some hope that, a lot of Jews are going to have been awakened by the atrocities of the last week. Not all. The hard left is still very powerful. But, I've been out there speaking and talking to people. I sense a lot of, not just anger, but sort of waking up to what's going on here and what to say. Because you have to ask yourself, what does Hamas want? Hamas doesn't want to, adjust Israel's borders.
Right.
It doesn't want to change its policies. It wants to kill Israel, and it wants to kill Jews. And quite frankly, that's very popular among Palestinians. And we've seen some of that in some of these awful demonstrations in the United States from the Arab community. So, there is some realization, but I'm afraid, I'm writing a piece today, just to give you what I'm doing when I'm not talking to people in the media about this. And I'm asking myself the question, what am I more afraid of or angry about? Is it the instances of people on the far left, like the Squad or Black Lives Matter in Chicago, endorsing Hamas? I mean, that's awful. It tells us everything we need to know about the radical left in this country.
Yep.
But what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid of respectable liberals, like all the columnists of the New York Times, who are saying, oh, we're really unhappy about this. Hamas is bad, but Israel don't do anything. Don't do anything but muss Hamas's hair. Don't attack. Just leave it. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid more of respectable liberal opinion than I am of radical leftists.
So respectable liberal opinion. There's another illusion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you about today, this day of anger and uprising. What are you hearing about it?
Well, it's got people scared. I mean, it doesn't take much to scare people in this country, does it? I don't think Hamas has a large network in this country to create the kind of havoc that they would like to create. I think they just want to scare people and create the illusion of it. They do have supporters in this country. We've seen them in the streets, but it's something you can't ignore it. I mean, there are guards around synagogues, and not just for Sabbath services, but just now today, Jewish schools have stepped up security, and they need to.
Well, it's one of these things again. It's like when, 500 people are standing outside the Opera House in Sydney saying "Gas the Jews." You might want to take notice of that. When you see thousands of people walking through the middle of the Loop in Chicago, you may want saying something similar to that and praising martyrs and so forth. You might want to take notice of that. That means something. That people are telling you something.
Yes, they are. They're telling you what they believe. It's shocking. It's a wake-up call to sort of the interfaith dialogue movement, which, continues to try to ignore the facts about some people. But again, I mean, these are horrible things. These are not the people that have leverage over Joe Biden.
Yeah, right.
It's the op-ed page of the New York Times. It's all these terrible people, espousing all these supposedly respectable liberal policies, who say, oh yeah, we're very upset. We don't think Jews should be slaughtered either, but don't don't mess with Hamas, don't attack. It's I mean, it's crazy, but that's also what's produced the last 30 years of failed, stupid American policy in the Middle East, with only the 4-year interregnum of Donald Trump, where we had some sanity and where stuff like this didn't happen. Although I have to say in passing that Donald Trump's statements this week were idiotic and not helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief, Jewish News Syndicate. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Good luck finishing that piece today. We'll look forward to it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, homeowners. Want to make your home a dream home? Then be sure to stop by the free home show in your neighborhood with one easy